As she said, I'm Nikolai, and I'm from Austria, and I want to talk about a little side project I did while I was here in New York. So I'm here since around February, and I had the idea to start collecting my GPS data on a daily basis and everywhere I go, so I don't miss the places where I go. Especially the restaurants are so hard to remember where they are. And for this reason, I started on my phone to collect these data and to kind of get a grasp of what I was doing here and to get to know I don't know how to say it, to get to know all these little nuances and patterns in my behavior and in my daily basis, and to discover interesting things. And before I come to my main results, I will just briefly talk about some GIS things which are interesting, and like the basics, how to work with GIS data, and a little thing maybe useful for some or the other. So, wait, that's... do you know how to do it full screen?
The arrows. There you go.
Oh yeah. Okay, first of all, yeah, of course, geoinformation data is coming from a 3D surface, and you want to map it on a 2D surface. And that's why there are many different kind of projections you're using. For example, the ordinary orthographic projection, where you look from a far distance on top of the globe, or the Robinson projection, which tries to cover most of the features of the Earth while maintaining that it looks good. And there are other projections like the Mercator projections, which is basically projecting the globe onto a cylinder. This is for our kind of the GPS coordinates which we have, is that we have latitude and longitude coordinates, which basically are like the longitude is this axis and the latitude is the upper axis. And that's how the data gets collected. And you have other kind of projections like the azimuthal equidistance projection, which I found quite interesting, especially for the name, which is kind of good for that. The thing in this projection is that the distance is always like this. The distance from Austin, like in the middle of the point here, is always the same to all directions, but it gets distorted while you go away from it. What was really important when I was working with GIS data was to work with spatial reference systems. The lower part got cut. So two of the main ones which I was using was the VGS 84, which was the GPS reference system, and to make, since you see that it is kind of skewed, you try to map it in such a way that the distances and the angles got preserved just in that main area. So if you see, like in the main area, it is accurate, but the more you go away from it, the more the distances get skewed and get skewed. And working with spatial data, you have two kinds of data. So the vector data, which was in my case what I was working with. So you have different file formats: shapefile, GeoJSON, and KML, which is from Google. And you have raster data, which is like images with geoinformation inside them. Yeah, there you have GeoTIF, and you can also map it into JPEG and PNG if you have some kind of attributes to them. So quickly to the tools which I was using. The one main tool which is really good for geoinformation data is QGIS. It's really nice to use, and it has a lot of plugins, and you can use it with Python. ArcGIS is from the same caliber. It's also pretty good. I haven't worked a lot with it, but I just looked into it. OGR and GDAL are like the core elements of QGIS, and generally when you work with geoinformation data. And yeah, of course, Google Earth and Maps is nice to view it. And what I was mainly focusing, since I'm working a lot with it, was Python. And you have a lot of really good interfaces to OGR and GDAL. Okay, so that was the boring part. So just you have an overview of what's going on there. And these are finally also the data sources I was working with. So NYC Open Data has a lot of good repositories when you work with geoinformation data or in any other data which you want to look into. There are a lot of good things around. For some of the visualizations, I used OpenStreetMaps as a base map where you can have the streets and everything on them put. And I used the NYC neighborhoods from the opendata.city website, which was really good for me because it has some good attributes to it, which you will see later. Yeah. So yeah, the topic of my presentation was the visual storytelling. So you have a bunch of data, what do you do with it? How do you present it in such a way that people can connect with it? What was inspiring me for me was the quantified self community. I don't know if anyone heard of it. There are a lot of people who collect their data and try to measure it and improve on their lives with it. And I really liked that. I really found that inspiring. I really like to see these patterns that I form every day and how I influence them, and maybe through this data see things that I could change. And so this is the visualization of my first week in New York and basically in America, which is for me, it's kind of a big feeling because you kind of see this is where I walked, I was there. And that's kind of strong for me. And you can see I walked a bit, so yeah. I like hiking. And yeah. I mean, just as a side note, there are some interesting features which I will show later in more detail. You can see that you have some jumps in between the roads. That's all because the GPS, in case somebody doesn't know or never worked with it, cannot go underground, but for some reason it works in some buildings. And also you have, especially in the finance district, which is not visible here, but in Midtown you have a lot of skyscrapers and they reflect the GPS signals from the satellite in such a way that it looks like I'm walking a wiggly line. And that's why these are just raw coordinates, which you see here. Wait, sorry. Yeah. Kind of skewed. Yeah, so this is all the points I collected so far. So you can see this is 0, then first week, second week, so it goes over to somewhere in May. And this is from midnight to midnight, yes. And you can see when I was tracking myself. So this was basically active tracking because the GPS for some reason didn't work, and when some Android update came, the app I had didn't work, and so I had to do some modification along the way. So you can see some kind of spikes, or not spikes, missing data in some places. And also I was not tracking all the time when I was working, or you can see a quick overview how much I was tracking. So it's about 500,000 points. And yes, so this is it. This is my actual visualization from the tracking. So you can see I was in Coney Island once, I was in Staten Island, that was kind of fun. I did the IKEA tour, which was really fun. Williamsburg is fun. And you can see all these things, and what's really interesting for me, and while I was tracking, was, for example, I didn't see Tribeca, for example. Now it's here, but when I was looking at my data, I didn't see that I wasn't there, and I was feeling like I see this whole city. And it's kind of like this surprising thing that when you're in New York, you kind of discover all the time something new, and even though it feels like I've seen everything kind of, but it still is kind of half of it. And you also can see that the Lower East Side is I didn't even step foot at it. Not that I don't like it, I haven't seen it yet. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I was talking about, the GPS, that you can see all these wiggly lines here, which is from the bouncing of the skyscrapers. And you can see like the missing points and everything. So it was just more as an illustration. This is in Midtown. You can see here it goes crazy, like here at Times Square. I don't know why I was so often there. I didn't like it that much. Yeah, and this was more like an artistic way of expressing the data. I tried to like put a heat map on top of the actual data, so it looks kind of like artistically. I don't know, if you like it, please say it. And this was interesting because of the New York Neighborhoods Library data, that I had all these boundaries of all the neighborhoods in New York, and I counted all the times where I was inside each neighborhood, and you can see that I was a lot in Upper East Side because I lived there, a lot in Midtown because I worked there, and Central Park because I work out there. And you can see like how often I'm in each district. And my final presentation, my final visualization is kind of shows it like this kind of, you know, in the games you have these like kind of fog worlds, and it kind of shows this feeling of how much I've seen and how much is missing. And I really liked that, that view of how much is left to explore. And yeah, what's next? I mean, there's so much to do. I mean, you can see like, you can do like geofencing, where you collect, where you get notified when you're in specific areas. You can combine this with other data. Like what I wanted to do is that I pull all my photos and I try to like do a collage, like every area here that it has some like kind of image which is really strong about this neighborhood, which really represents or really shows the diversity of each neighborhood. And yeah, I mean, if you have any questions or comments, yeah, that was it, yes. Yeah.
Is WES84 still the standard for geospatial information?
I have to be honest, I'm not exactly sure. I read somewhere that it's for GPS, but I'm not sure. There was another article which I read which didn't point at it as GPS. So I guess it's still, but I'm not exactly sure.
Okay, cool.
Yes?
How much code and application work does this involve for you to have made this, and also is it something that you are like putting up on some GitHub or something?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. Yes. First, I didn't put the GPS logger on there. It's called, I'm not sure exactly. I can post it on the Meetup page. I will definitely do like a short GitHub repo about it. Post some of the things there, which the thing is, I worked in Windows with it, and that was a big issue with GIS. So please, if you can, work on Linux or Mac. The binaries are really hard to install for some of the libraries, so I actually worked with GDAL and OGR itself, so I didn't work with any wrapper. That made it a bit difficult, but it made it interesting to see how it actually works. And yes, so I will try to put it up and post it on the Meetup page.
What was the question?
Where I put the repo on, if I put a repo on, and how much software it was. Yeah. Yes.
So I was wondering about this GPS logger, because I'm recording like my locations with my phone kind of passively, but you seem to have like super accurate locations all the time. Like you see like 500,000 points or something, or millions. Like, can you tell me about your experience with this GPS logger? How much did it cost? How long's the battery life? Would you recommend it?
Okay, I'll just show it real quick. It's actually my phone, but I need this thing that it doesn't run out of battery all the time. So yeah, it holds like half a day, and then you need this thing or some cafe to just charge it up. Now I can show you the app which I used. I'm using Google location history also as a test, and yeah, the accuracy is not that much. The app is called GPS Log. It's logging right now. And you can set in this app how often and how accurate you want it. It's a bit of a playing around, so try to mix with the settings, because you have to have it on constant running, and I have it on a frequency of 1 second. And you can adapt the accuracy. So you can see all these like flying around. This is like when I set the accuracy a bit higher. And yes.
I'm sure that Nikolai would be happy to take more
Yeah.
questions at the end, but the schedule has the next speakers starting now. So